Welcome everyone to the Streakers Podcast. We are the ones that got away. I am Mason Migliara. That is Patrick Previty. We're still here on YouTube. Hope everyone is doing great. There are some people who are not doing great though, and we'll get into that later. But Patrick, shout outs of the week. What was your shout out from this weekend?
My shout out from the weekend. Well, there was plenty because there was so much that happened over this weekend, but my shout out has to go to Vegas for putting the line at the Iowa Michigan game in the first half, the over under at point 0.5 for points scored for Iowa. I thought that was absurd. That's ridiculous. And it shows just how awful that offense is, and they didn't even score a point for the entire game. So shout out Vegas for having the balls or the research to put that line down. I had heard, I don't know if this is true, that it did move to 2.5 at some point, maybe just uh obviously to account for a field goal happening in the first half, but I just thought that number was hilarious, and I don't know if I can really even remember a number like that, especially in a conference championship game.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And my shout out actually goes hand in hand with that. My shout out's going to go out to the X Golf Club in Cedar Rapids. What they did was free beer until Iowa scored. Well, as you noted, they in fact did not score. So it was free beer for the entire game. Every Iowa fan was probably just down in beers who was at that day. It's like a Top Golf kind of thing, for anyone who knows what that is. So that is kudos to them. Probably their corporate is not very happy with that, but free beer for everyone. Iowa loses, Michigan is number one overall, and yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later. But from this weekend, we had some predictions that we had. Patrick, where were we right and where were we wrong on some things?
So I took a lot of upsets over the weekend. I
Sure did.
was I was on I was on something when I picked these games, and I got a few of them right. I've been riding with the Cardinals as of late, and they were able to pull it off. The Steelers look like they got a lot more issues than maybe some people thought, and the Cardinals were able to win 24-10. That was my pick of the week, essentially, kind of my best pick of the week. I was able to get the Rams game correct, which was a bit of a relief. I think there was a lot of people who still took the Browns despite all of their quarterback issues.
Hmm.
And I said that the Saints and Lions game would have uh could be a trap game or it could be close. The Lions got out to a huge lead, and the Saints actually ended up clawing back, and the Lions won by just 5 points. So I give myself a little shout out there. The Dolphins just murdered the Commanders. I don't know if anybody could have exactly predicted, or if anybody even bothered to predict that the Commanders would win that game. But I think the Dolphins just pouring it on the Commanders is just exactly what they've done all season to mid to bad teams in the NFL. So right there. And then I did place a bet on Sunday uh for the Chargers to cover. The line was 4.5, and they won 6-0. So I'm very thankful that they were able to get some sort of offense going. But we've been known that the Patriots, this is it, man. This is their worst season that they've had under Bill Belichick by a mile. And this is probably the worst team in the NFL outside of the Carolina Panthers. And I don't even know how that game would go against the Panthers, just with how bad the Patriots are. And where I was wrong, well, I chose the Broncos to beat the Texans, chose the Titans to beat the Colts, and I chose the Panthers to beat the Bucks. So I was wrong on all of those. And also, I don't think anybody in their right mind saw the Eagles game going like it did. I certainly
Oh, yeah, no, I certainly did not either. I actually did pretty good on the first half of games, starting off with the Dallas Cowboy game. I had that one right. Chargers, Dolphins. I had the Texans over the Broncos, so that's for something where we differed. And then I also had the Colts over the Titans. And then after that, and then the Lions over the Saints, I got the Jets wrong. I got the Eagles wrong, which I think a lot of people did. According to ESPN, 53% of people chose the Eagles to win that game, and the Niners just absolutely throttled them. That we will get into also later. I also had the Steelers winning, and that didn't happen. Obviously, the injury to Kenny Pickett had an effect on that. Um, and then both of the primetime games are very, very surprising. Both Kansas City and Jacksonville are basically were in control of their own destiny pretty much. Um, they just need to keep winning and then they would kind of battle it out for the number one seed. But they both ended up losing. Green Bay played fantastic. They found a way to stop that offense, and they were very impressive on offense, and I did not predict that. And then last night, Jacksonville, the injury again. Injuries have been plaguing a lot of teams this year, but this injury here to Trevor Lawrence was definitely detrimental to them trying to win that game. Although he was there for a majority of it, I think he got hurt with like what 5 minutes or so in the fourth quarter. So props to Browning, and again, that's something we'll talk about later. We'll talk about NFL after. I think we need to start off with college football. I think that's the biggest talking point coming out of this weekend. Um, yeah, just what are your thoughts initially from this Final Four playoff picture?
Okay, so I've been talking a lot of college football lately. I don't think I think I said that I thought Louisville was going to win. I hadn't really given it
You
much
did.
thought necessarily and I also thought Georgia was going to win. I hadn't given it too much thought whether or not like Alabama would have gotten in over Florida State. I was thinking about maybe other scenarios more closely. Um, but my overall thought with what actually happened and occurred was, look, you need Michigan, Washington. Nobody's really talking about this because that's not a huge storyline, but you low key could have flipped that. But I think Michigan looked dominant through the entire season for the most part. So they they passed the eye test maybe more than Washington did, even though I think the Pac-12 arguably top to bottom was better than the Big Ten this year.
Hmm.
Um, so you could have argued to switch them, but Michigan at 1 and then Washington at 2. We talked about that with the Pac-12 championship game. Great week for Washington. Shout out Jake Browning. I was okay with that. So then we had Texas, and they really put it to Oklahoma State, and I was like, wow, they took care of business. So that means for the most part that I don't think that they're going to get jumped. So I was like, okay, like depending on what happens in this Alabama Georgia game, even though I was skeptical, I don't think Texas is getting jumped by a team that they beat, even with a win. And then Alabama did actually beat Georgia, and I did not expect that. And I just figured, okay, either Alabama's going to be 5, Texas is going to be 4, and Florida State's going to be 3, or they're both jumping Florida State. And Florida State just didn't show enough, in my opinion. And I know that you might disagree and others might disagree. I thought for a multitude of reasons, like I could respect the committee's decision on why they didn't let them in. I know that you feel like they should have been left in. I'm actually fine with it. I don't believe in best 4 teams being the argument for the entire year, but I think when it comes to any sort of consolation, I think that they did get the best 4 teams in and the best possible games. I honestly don't know if Florida State, and then I'll give it to you, and then you can have the floor. I just wanted to say this one last point. I really don't know if Florida State, with Michigan having a month to prepare and having their backup quarterback with how they've looked in the past 2 games, would have scored a single point on Michigan in the semifinal. I really don't think that they would have. But who knows how that Alabama Michigan game is going? I think the line opened up at 2.5. So
Mm.
who knows, But floor is yours, Mason.
So I will start off with the side of they did get the entertainment factor correct. What they are trying to avoid is blowouts. Last year, it happened when Georgia throttled TCU in the championship game. But TCU still had to beat Ohio. Was it Ohio State? No, they beat Michigan. They beat Michigan in the semifinals, and nobody thought that was going to happen. No one thought that was going to happen, and it did. And then we had an uncompetitive uh, championship game. Now, thinking about it at this moment, TCU had that month to prepare for Michigan, and they just had a good game plan. They were able to execute it, and that's what happened. And then when it came to 1 week, prepare for Georgia, oh shit, we're not ready for that. So I will say that they did get probably the best 4 teams into the playoffs. I will say that. But now putting that aside, what have we, since we were little, what is the goal? Win games. And That is what Florida State did. They won every single game. They got up, went to two-a-days. They were doing workouts. They were doing everything as a team and working to be undefeated. That's what the goal is. That's what sports is. You go out there and your goal is to score more than the other team. And they did that for 13 straight weeks. 13 straight. They did not lose. Week 1 against LSU, their backs were against the wall. They're going up against the number 5 team at a neutral site, and they end up winning that game. They scored 21 unanswered to end up winning that game. And then let me pull up their schedule just because I'm going to pull up their entire schedule.
I
Week
love I
two,
love this energy from you. Okay, go.
week two, they dismantle a Southern Miss team. Yeah, okay, we get it. It's Southern Miss, but they scored 66 points. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what you're expected to do, and they did it. Now they play Boston College. This is their worst win of the season, where it shouldn't have been a nail biter at the end. They allowed Boston College to score 2 late touchdowns in the fourth quarter, but they still ended up winning away from Tallahassee, and they beat Boston College. Then they go to Clemson. You're a college football guy. Nobody goes into Clemson and beats Clemson. That does not happen. That has not happened very much in the last couple of years. Florida State was on a current 7-game losing streak going into playing Clemson, and they end up winning that game in overtime. That's a very impressive win. I don't care how bad Clemson was this year, or if they, not even that they were bad, they just were not Clemson-esque. But they ended up being ranked at the end of the season. They were still ranked number 22. So that's an impressive win. Then you got Virginia Tech, who they were able to play good against. They had a good run game. I think Trey Benson had 3 touchdowns. Jordan Travis had himself 2 as well. And then they play Syracuse and win 41-3. And then you play Duke in Tallahassee and you win by scoring 3 touchdowns and keeping the Duke team scoreless, who was ranked. I will say Leonard, he did come out with an injury in that game, so that probably had a bit of a factor. But apparently injuries are we'll talk about injuries later. And then Wake Forest and Pitt. Wake Forest, I feel like, ended their season basically last year, so I felt like that was kind of like a revenge game almost. And then Pitt, they haven't been good all year, but you still won the game. I think they won that game 40 to something, 40 to 17, somewhere around there. And then you had Miami. That's a storied rivalry between Florida State and Miami, and they end up finding a way to win that game, 27-20. And then this is where it all goes down for Florida State. They go down 14-0 in Northern Alabama, and then you have Jordan Travis scampering across the middle of the field, and then the hip drop tackle, and his ankle just goes sideways. And that's where I literally said it right when it happened. I said their shot at a national championship is over because they needed that guy. And I totally understand not having him is pretty much the main reason or the reason that they are not in the football playoffs. But it's absurd because football is a team sport. It's not one person, it's a team. So if you're going to base it off of one person being out, what does that say to the other, everyone else on that roster, all the coaches? Like what? You were just needed that one guy? It's just not fair. And then they go and they beat Florida in the swamp with their backup quarterback and win by 2 scores. And then they go and play Louisville in the ACC championship with their 3rd string quarterback, who was only played 4 snaps his entire career, and they find a way to win. They win 16-6 against a Louisville team who I believe was like one of the top 20 offenses or top 25 offenses in all of college football this season. No one on Florida State's defense was hurt. They could have very easily done the same thing that they've done all year, Louisville, and scored points, but they didn't. And when they had the opportunity to take the lead or to shift the momentum, when they got a turnover on their own 20 or against Florida State, whatever, where they were right there, it was like 3rd and goal, 2nd and goal, and then they throw a pick. Florida State's defense won that game for them. So for me, it's absurd when you go 13-0 in a season in a Power 5 conference and you get left out. To me, it just seems like the committee just said, "Oh yeah, these are the best teams. No one, it doesn't matter who's deserving or not." That's not how sports should be. And the argument of the SEC is better than the ACC. The ACC has 11 bowl eligible teams. The SEC has 9. That shows that the SEC is not better than the ACC this year. They were 6-4. The ACC was against the SEC. So any argument that says the SEC is better is not true. It's not overall better. It might be very top heavy. I will say that it's very top heavy, but overall, up top to bottom, it's not better than the ACC this year. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about this year. We're talking about 2023 season. We're not talking about everything from the past. So, and then when you look at Bama, listen, I actually agree that Texas should have been over Florida State. I think that that is fine. I wasn't mad with that. But for Bama to be put over Florida State, I think is blasphemy. It is ridiculous. It is unfair because you just giving a team that's been in there all the time. And if it wasn't for a 4th and 31 and a rivalry game against Auburn in Auburn, if they don't convert that with 30 seconds left, the last play of their game, basically, we're not having this conversation. Florida State's in, and that's it.
Wow. You do make a good case. Now, I don't know. There's a lot to touch on here. The injury part, I think that's where we agree the most. I agree it is a team game. God, I just wish they didn't look so shitty in the last two games. I know what you said about
Yeah.
the offense for Florida State, or excuse me, the defense for Florida State and being able to hold Louisville down to 6 points was extremely impressive. I'm not taking that away. They just, you know, they had 55 yards of passing on their own offensive side of the ball, and that's just really not what they needed. Like they needed a certain game that I think would have like shown the committee that they can really handle themselves currently as it is, like without their starting quarterback.
But that was with their third string. And the reason their third string was playing was because Roadmaker, he had gotten a concussion and they deemed him out at game time. So they had been kind of practicing with both of them potentially playing in the game. And then it ended up being the freshman, um, oh my, Brock Glenn. That's his, yeah, Brock
Yeah.
Glenn. He's the one that ended up starting, but they had been having both Tate and Brock playing in first team the entire week. So
The
by the time we get to the playoffs, Tate's going to be fine. He's not going to be in the concussion protocol anymore, and you would have your backup basically playing with a full month of practice. Like I don't know. I just think they cheated
I don't
Florida
feel
State.
bad. I don't feel bad for the week leading up to practice. I made a mistake on the last episode that we recorded because I didn't think that he went back into the game. Because I watched bits and pieces at the end of the game. I didn't know that the second stringer came back in after getting knocked out. Like he probably realistically shouldn't have even been practicing if he was going to be ruled a game time decision because of a concussion. Like I don't know. He was never. I don't know what the hell is going on with that, but like. I see what you mean though, and I was actually going to say that before you mentioned it. Was that they would have had a month to prepare with their backup quarterback, and he would have been ready to go. Um, we agree closer on the injury point. Now I just as far as like the SEC versus the ACC, I see what you mean, and I understood what you were saying about like, yeah, you're just talking about this specific year. You're not talking about the history of it and all that good stuff. Because like, look, we've known now like the SEC has been the best conference in the nation for the last 15 years. I think I'd have to really look at the games that you see. You mentioned the 6-4 record. I've heard that. I need to see those games. Obviously I know Florida State's got one over LSU. And I really can't even think of too many off the top of my head. I need to see them. Maybe the SEC is more top heavy this year. But I understand what you mean. When I look at like Georgia and Alabama, and Florida State's going to get their crack at Georgia. I'm very interested in how that game ends up. I just don't
Hmm.
see like teams like Clemson or Miami or Louisville like being able to really hang with even LSU or obviously Alabama and Georgia. Like I just don't know if I see that. And I think that's why some people are looking at the SEC and saying like, oh well, they have to be better than the ACC in a sense. I honestly did think as a conference this year, because Clemson had a rough time. I thought that the ACC conference, and I think this is kind of the conclusion that they came from top to bottom, um was closer to what the AAC was when UCF was in it
Hmm.
than the fourth best conference this year. So I think the fourth best conference this year was the Big 12. I think it went Pac-12, uh, SEC slash Big 10, and then the Big 12. I thought that was the rankings for the conferences this year. And I think that the conclusion that they came to was that this conference this year was closer to the one of the better group of five conferences that we have seen than the Big 12 this year. And honestly, if they didn't believe that, then I have no explanation for this move because I really don't like the injury play to be it. I understand what they were saying because man, they really, really dropped off when they lost Jordan Travis. And honestly, he's such a great player. It's a shame because he's not going to New York, but like he really showed how important he was. So that's my only thing where it's like, like I understand why they did it in a sense because I truly don't respect the ACC. I respect Florida State for going 13-0. And you're right, you you can only play who's in front of you. And they did schedule out of conference, which was a big deal. Now I'll just like leave it. I'll say this one last thing because I want you to say more on this. Because I feel like you got a little bit more. Okay. Well, I'll say
Yeah.
in college football, we're at a crossroads. It's like in the NFL, you have your first place schedules for the first place teams, and everybody in your division plays the same division across conferences, and you have very similar common opponents. And in the NBA, it's very similar to that, where you're playing everybody in the West, a home and home, and then like you have your teams in the East, and everybody plays each other the same amount of times, and it's all fair and and easy to follow. Well, the in-season tournament's a little bit more convoluted, but now in the NBA, but for the most part, like the scheduling is fair. In college football, man, these teams do not play each other like ever. And it is so tough. And I think that's why we have humans actually deciding whether or not a 13-0 team is better or worse than a 12-1 team. Because when we're looking at these schedules, they're not built the same. And we like have to recognize that. Or we'll get a game that's 65-7 in the national championship game. And not that TCU didn't earn it to be there. Like, but we just have to be careful because I feel like sometimes we could be asking or barking up the wrong tree. It's amazing. These things usually get figured out. In the
Yeah.
first five, oh no, maybe I won't go five. When was the first year of the playoff? 2015. First 7 years, man, it had figured itself out every year. I mean, we had said chaos is ensuing. It's all going to be, crazy. The committee's going to have these hard decisions, and then usually they end up with three teams, and then they have to decide which sucker didn't win their conference championship to put in. This year was not the case, and this was definitely a year where 6 or 8 or 12 team playoff would have been the best case scenario. And I think everybody would have loved to have watched that. And you would also got, some other teams that like maybe even a Missouri team that would have, loved to, it would have been great for their program to go in. But it's just, I do find it amazing. This is going to be the last year. So I know Florida State is cut the raw end of the stick. I mean, they'll be talking about this for years, especially if they beat Georgia, about how
Mm-hmm.
deserving that this team should have been. I mean, do you think if they beat Georgia, I don't know if you had anything lined up that you were going to say, but I'll throw this question out and you can answer it and you can go back to whatever you wanted to say in response to me. If Florida State beats Georgia, you think they would claim a national championship?
Knowing the people that I have at Florida State and who are Florida State fans, I don't think they would. I don't think they're that shallow. Um, because obviously us going to UCF, like we know the conversation of national champions. I will say I have never claimed that UCF was a national champion. They were undefeated. They did earn every right to get into the playoffs. They set the precedent for Cincinnati to get into the playoffs. So that I understand, but I'm not someone who's comparing FSU this season to UCF of that season. It's completely different. It's completely different. Um, but no, I don't think that they would claim national champion status. I think that they would claim a 14-0 season and a what could have been if they had the shot. And that's all that they're asking for, really. All they were asking for was a shot because they deserved it. And again, I will sit on the point of we play sports. We've all people who are watching this podcast, they know sports, they've played sports. For whatever reason, college football is unfair and you can be perfect and you don't get rewarded for it. Like what? Florida State gets rewarded with the Orange Bowl against Georgia. Ooh. Like they wanted a national championship. Jared Verse had the opportunity to go into the NFL draft last season and he said, "No, I want to come back to win a national championship." He didn't come back to win a bowl game against Georgia. That's not what he came back for. And obviously, if Jordan Travis was not hurt, they would be in. I think it would be a shoe in. I don't think it would be a problem. I think they would be at 3, maybe even No, I think they would be at 3 if Jordan Travis was there. They would be at 3. Texas would be at 4, and it would be done. The one thing I do want to say is this Georgia team. I kind of thought about it all season. Who did they really play? Like, what was their schedule? Who did they play anyone of difficulty other than Bama at the end of the season? They played Missouri, I'm sure at one point, but
Yeah.
they they played Alabama at the end of the season. And the reason they've been ranked number 1 is because they haven't lost in 2 years. They hadn't lost in 2 years, so they had that respect and they had that little pass that said, yeah, you haven't lost in 2 years, you're the best team in college football. But then they lost and you go from 1 to 6. Like why is Florida State sandwiched between Bama and Georgia? I don't know. I don't get that.
Well, I will say the common opponent, so they both beat LSU. I definitely think that
Hmm.
that had to have been brought up when the
Oh yeah.
committee was talking. And you're completely right about Georgia, though. They were getting respect, and I had said this. They're getting respect because they didn't lose in 2 years. I mean, what was their win streak? 29 games or something like that. I mean, it was a
Yeah.
pretty monstrous win streak.
Hmm.
And as far as who they played, they did beat Kentucky very handily, and then they beat Missouri, Ole Miss, and Tennessee. They blew out Ole Miss and Tennessee. I think that was what their resume
Okay.
looked like. It was just SEC teams. They didn't schedule out a conference
Hmm.
for the most part. I mean, they had their Georgia Tech game, and then they had UT Martin and Ball State and UAB because the SEC only plays 8 conference games. They didn't have a great resume, and I think that is why they fell. And the committee realized,
Hmm.
oh, like this team did not win the real test that they had at the end of the year. So I think that can be your answer as to maybe the LSU game was one of the deciding factors, but Alabama had a lot of close games too this year, and I feel like that was going kind of unnoticed and untalked about as the season progressed. Like obviously they lost to Texas, but they had a close game against USF. They won by 2 touchdowns against Ole Miss, but it wasn't the dominant performance we usually see from them over Ole Miss, and Ole Miss was good this year, had a good team,
Hmm.
10 wins.
Yeah.
They had a close game against A&M, won by 6, 3-point win against Arkansas, a couple touchdowns against Tennessee, a couple touchdowns against LSU, but that's a good win. But
Hmm.
Florida State blew the doors off LSU and their defense, and obviously a really close game against Auburn that you have mentioned, you know, earlier, where
If that
you
doesn't
know,
happen.
yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah, if that doesn't happen, then obviously they're not even close to getting in. So
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
I mean, they had a lot of close games too. I see why the committee made their decision. I think you make a good point. Would they have done this if Jordan Travis was still healthy and not out? I'm
They
leaning more towards as the days go on that it looks like no. Even if they would have struggled, they would have had more confidence in them. But I see it. I see like a multitude of reasons why they could have come to this conclusion. I really do.
Yeah.
I don't think that they're ridiculous. I think that it leans towards it feels dirty to me. I mean, I don't want you to think that like, oh, I think that this was justice served, but
Mm-mm.
like it feels dirty. It just feels like it could be the right move. I don't know, man. I'm ready for an expanded playoff. I don't know if I really ever wanted to see 12 teams. Like I think I was more on the side of 8 or 6, but I'm ready. It's go time now. Like I don't want to see
Mhm.
a 14 playoff after this. I mean, I was a hardcore 14 playoff guy
Yeah.
through and through until we changed all the conferences, and realized that was going to be obsolete anyway.
Yeah.
I'm ready to go. I've seen the worst part of this now.
For sure. And I'll say the last point on this. Definitely Florida State got robbed, but at the end of the day, college football, it's still a business. It's all about money. And Florida State doesn't have those same ratings that a team like Alabama has or Texas. And then Washington and Michigan, they 100% deserve to be there. Um, and they are two of the most dominant teams in college football this season. And of course, Florida State was too. But at the end of the day, it's all about money, and that's just kind of where it fell short for them. And it's just life, you know. Sometimes it just kicks your ass and says "f you," and that's it. Um, I agree. I'm very ready for this 12 team playoff. I think 6 or 8 is probably more acceptable because once you get to that 9, 10, 11, 12 area, it's like, can you really, is it really likely that you're going to beat a number 1 team, a number 2 team? Eh, eh. But listen, the more teams that get in, the more opportunity it is for more fan bases to experience playoff college football, and that is an electric atmosphere. And to have home playoff games in your at your college, that is going to be amazing, and I think it's going to do great things for college football. But what happened this season for this Florida State team for this college football season, it's definitely tarnished a lot, and I think a lot of people are upset about it, and they just don't feel that college football is uh fair or even a real I don't know if it's a real I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but if it's a real sport, because sports, you're supposed to score more than the other team, and when you do that and you do that the most, you deserve a shot at winning a championship. And at the end of the day, that did not happen this year. Florida State went 13-0, and there are two teams in there who have a loss that have a chance at winning a championship, and a team that is undefeated is going to play just a regular bowl game that just doesn't really matter at the end of the day. So it's
And
really, really unfortunate.
oh my gosh, we're gonna we're covering all the bases here. I will say though, in defense of this expanded playoff, the Orange Bowl will matter in the years that it is not. Well, it will always be a playoff game. So I believe so. I mean, obviously you might have home playoff games. I think they still have some stuff to figure out with the 12 team playoff, but yeah, it's amazing because the Orange Bowl doesn't matter anymore. You got players sitting out. And obviously to those players, take care of your
That's
business.
yeah,
Take care of your business. But you know
yeah.
what I mean. It does take away, and it is a shame. I mean, the Orange Bowl is supposed to be a great bowl game.
Mhm.
But that was there too many injuries, especially in that bowl game. I believe it started right with with the Michigan tight end. Was it Jake
Oh
Butt?
yeah, I think it was Jake Butt. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
remember that.
So that was, I think, one of the first dominoes to fall because people really
Yeah,
started to think about not playing in those games.
yeah.
Also, in other college football news, before we head into the NFL Week 13 review,
Oh
the
my gosh,
Heisman
yep.
candidates, I guess the official Heisman candidates have been announced. And who's going to New York? Michael Penix Jr., Bo Nix, Marvin Harrison Jr., and who's the other one that I'm forgetting?
You said Bo Nix, Michael Penix, Marvin Harris. The apparent leader
Jaden
and
Daniels.
favorite, Jane Daniels. Yes,
Shouldn't that show you how this Heisman is going this year for me?
exactly.
I don't
Yeah,
know. I'm not as interested in it, but I think honestly, I think Michael Penix has a real
yeah,
case
I think so
because
too.
I think he would have my vote personally. What's Jaden Daniels? I don't want to
I
say
don't
Heisman moment, but like, come on, he lost the biggest games of the season. Like he lost the
exactly.
ones that mattered. And Michael Penix, man, he wasn't great in the Pac-12 championship game, but he was great in the first matchup against Oregon, and they took care of business, man. The Pac-12 was so good this year, top to bottom.
So good.
Top to bottom, very good.
Yeah. I think it should go to either him or Bo Nix. I think Bo Nix has had a fantastic season. It's just he couldn't get over that hurdle against against Washington. So uh
Yeah, I would be so
yeah,
shocked if Bo Nix got it over Michael
yeah,
Penix Jr.
yeah.
That just because they played twice. Um,
Mhm.
so that would surprise me. But I don't really know why Jaden Daniels is such a heavy favorite. I think he's
I
very
don't
good, and I'm
either.
interested to see if some people cast their ballot
Mhm.
before the championship games because obviously Jaden Daniels didn't play, so they thought that they had seen enough and like nobody was going to catch him no matter what. Or if the odds are so high because Vegas also knows that hey, there's a bit of a South bias. There's a lot of Southern voters who will leave
Yeah,
Penix Jr. off their ballot or put him way down, way further down, so as to manipulate the point total to give Jane Daniels a bigger advantage in a sense, because they obviously don't, want anybody from the West or the North or wherever to win it. Maybe that's conspiracy theory, but Vegas
yeah.
always knows they're pretty on top of things like that. So you never
My
know.
money, my money is going to go on Michael Penix just because his team went 13-0 and in probably the toughest conference this entire season. He had the most passing yards with just over 4,000, but his touchdown to interception ratio was 33-9 with an 83.4 QBR. And then when you compare it to Bo Nix, he had just over 4,000 yards, 40 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and a 91 QBR. And then Daniels, he had 3,800 yards, 40 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and the number one QBR at 95.7.
And
So
then
based on the numbers, I guess Daniels has a slight, like the slightest edge if QBR is what you're going off of. But I mean, I guess they don't care about wins this year. So
well,
I'm
and
sorry.
Daniels did have 1,000 yards rushing too. Like
Yeah.
his stats are crazy. They are otherworldly. It does remind you a lot of like a Lamar Jackson year where, yeah,
Hmm.
sure, like they had big games. They maybe didn't pull them all out.
Hmm.
But his stats are just absurd. I understand what you're saying. Honorable mention to Bo Nix. I would be so shocked if he were to win it over Michael Penix Jr. I really think it's Penix or Jaden Daniels. And
Yep,
I would throw a little bit of money on Penix. I'm sure there's good value there. I mean, his stats
for
aren't
sure.
crazy, but he's the guy on the second best team in the country, and he's had Heisman buzz the entire year.
Hmm.
And he's got a bit of like this national recognition. He's been around for 6 years. All these guys have been around for a long time outside of Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yep.
So I think that there's also a little bit of buzz with him as well that matches the other two guys. And just to say a word about Marvin Harrison Jr. Thank you for coming to New York. But you needed that win over Michigan and a
Hmm.
Big Ten championship game and a playoff spot. I think
Yep,
those were the prerequisites
for sure.
for him to win it. And it's
For sure.
unfortunate. He'll be going to the NFL draft though because he's ready
Oh yeah.
and he'll
Yeah.
be a top 5 pick probably. I'd imagine. Kyle McCord just
Hmm.
transferred. A lot of transfer QBs. We'll talk about that actually. Yeah, we'll talk about that in our Sunday NFL preview for
For
Week
sure.
14 games because there's
Yep.
a ton of dudes who just entered the portal. Dylan Gabriel, familiar
Hmm.
face for UCF fans. Yeah,
Yep.
so he's leaving again. I actually don't understand that move personally. I don't know what's going on there. And then obviously they told Kyle McCord that they couldn't guarantee him a spot. So a lot of guys are transferring. Who knows? Notre Dame needs a guy. Ohio State obviously needs a guy. So
Hmm.
musical chairs once again in the offseason. NIL
Yep.
is changing the game. But now we'll move into NFL Week 13 review, kind of going off of where we were right and where we were wrong. The 49ers just killed the Philadelphia Eagles. Looks like Vegas had something up their sleeve. They were favored in the game, and that is their second dominant win over an NFC East playoff contender.
Mm.
Mason. Wow.
Seeing this score, I was shocked. Maybe not the fact that the 49ers won, which it could have gone either way for sure, but a 42 to 19, that's insane. Christian McCaffrey got himself another touchdown. What a no surprise there. He had one on the day on the ground. Did he have any in the air? He might have. Let me pull that up. No, he didn't. He did not have one in the air, but still, Brock Purdy. They're saying that he has MVP. I think he's the MVP favorite right now.
He is now the MVP favorite.
That is crazy.
Yeah,
I
what a
think he's
world do we live in?
uh, the Mr. Irrelevant winning MVP. I mean, I guess it's kind of happened before with Tom Brady, but
Ish. Yeah.
yeah, ish,
Yeah.
ish, ish. Um, yeah, it's crazy that Brock Purdy is going to be the favorite at the moment. I don't think it'll end up that way. I think later in I think that that award is determined later in the season when we're down the stretch. I know we're getting there, but I think it's like those last like 3 or 4 games where it's like, all right, is this where you're? Is this who it's gonna be? So,
Yeah, I think it also depends on where you end up in the standings. Because
mhm,
right now the Eagles are 10-2, and the Niners are still 9-3, which is kind of amazing when you think back to it. They were started 5-0, 3-game losing streak. Then now they've won 4 in a row. The 49ers have gotten it together and they seem like a buzz saw, but they're still like right in the thick of things
mhm,
in the NFC playoffs. Right now they are the second seed, but they're still tied with Detroit.
mhm,
And they have a win over Dallas, and Dallas would have to catch the Eagles, and obviously the Falcons are there at 6-6. It depends on where they end up, in my opinion. I really do think that, and we could honestly we can mention the MVP talk right now. Um, I think if the Dolphins keep the number one seed in the AFC, I think there needs to be real consideration for Tyreek Hill as being the MVP. I think a lot of people want to chalk it up to Offensive Player of the Year, but if he were to get to 2,000 yards, even in a 17 game season, he is clearly, in my opinion, the locomotive in that Dolphins offense. When you look
for
at
sure.
Tua's statistics and who he is throwing to, shout out to him. Not trying to take anything away from him, but he's got
Mhm.
3,400 yards, and a good chunk of that is to
It's about
Tyreek Hill
half.
and huh?
It's about half.
Yeah. A good chunk is to Hill, but then also he's got 743 to Waddle, and that is half of what Hill has. So
Hmm.
it's like so much is going to Tyreek. He's got 12 touchdowns, 127 targets, and 93 receptions. I mean, where like his numbers at by the end of this year. So he's got 5 more games left. And I think that they want this 1 seed. So they're probably going to go up um, 2 week 18.
18. Yep.
Yeah. So they're probably going to go all the way through the whole season. What is he going to end up at? I don't even know what exactly he's on pace for, but he could end up with what, 130 receptions, 2,000 yards,
I could see
17 touchdowns.
Yeah, I could see maybe like I think he's at just under 1,500 right now. I think he needs like five and change total 500 some yards for 2,000. But I can see him getting to 21, maybe pushing 22, maybe pushing
Because his
22.
because his average is so high at
Yeah.
15.9. And
Yep.
obviously he just deep threat. Like he could have some monster games and not a
He
not
had
a ton of receptions.
two of them this week. So
Yeah.
he had a 70 some yarder and a 60 yarder. Like it's just that's what happens when you play man against him. He said it after the game. He was like, "Yeah, I saw they were playing man against me and I said, that's pretty disrespectful, but thanks for the disrespect." Like it allows him to get these stats because Tyreek Hill has said it. Tua is the most accurate quarterback in the NFL. The most accurate quarterback that Tyreek Hill's ever had, and he had Patrick Mahomes. And everyone argues that Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback. So that would mean if he's saying this about Tua, then Tua is going to be the most accurate in all of NFL. And that he is. He's able to put balls where he wants it.
I
He did
think
it.
I think Tua is the most accurate deep ball thrower in the NFL.
That's crazy. That's crazy because it's true.
Yeah.
But
Well,
so many people are like, oh, Tua doesn't have an arm. Tua can't do this. Tua can't do that. He just dinks and dunks. Dude, how many times do we see him, Tua, just go back and just throw his entire body into the throw? Okay, who cares? Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen just go like this, but Tua goes like this and he uses his whole body, but the ball gets there and it's exactly where it needs to be. And that's all that matters. Who cares about how flashy it is? If you score the touchdown, who cares how it looks? You score the touchdown, you get the points.
yeah,
I
keep
just
preaching, keep preaching. But I mean, most of it is going to Tyreek Hill. So shout out to it. And he hasn't had like the perfect season to where he could get the MVP buzz anymore. There maybe was a little bit at the beginning of the year was like,
mhm.
oh, he could. I don't know what his odds were like, through week 6 or whatever. But he he certainly has played well, and Tyreek Hill has been, in my opinion, the biggest reason without a doubt. I think the Lions only suffer from wins against big teams or the best teams. They don't have very many. They obviously lost their big games against the Bills, Eagles, and Chiefs. They got the Cowboys, Ravens, and Bills. We've talked about this after we've looked over their schedule before, whether or not they could get the 1 seed. That's also big in the MVP talk. But we'll move back to the 49ers and Eagles game. I pose you this question. If they rematch again, I've already determined this. If the 49ers and the Cowboys rematch in the playoffs again, I think that the 49ers are going to beat the Cowboys again. Right now, I'm thinking 49ers came out with a vengeance from last year's NFC Championship game. They wanted to show everybody, like, hey, like, that didn't even count. Like, and it wasn't even close. And I don't know how many
Mm,
people really did count it, just considering the absurdity of their quarterback situation. But they showed everybody, hey, don't forget about us.
mhm.
We had a 3-game skid a handful of weeks ago that we experienced, but we're back. And I was super impressed. And I'm starting to think that if the Eagles and 49ers played in the playoffs, like I think the 49ers, it would be theirs to lose. And I think that this is the best team in the NFC without a doubt. I have to respect it.
I
But what
think
do you
so
think?
too. I think so too. I agree. If it was another rematch between the 49ers and the Eagles, I think the 49ers would win. I don't care if it's in Philly or if it's in San Francisco. With a full healthy team, I think that they are better top to bottom than the Eagles.
And I just kind of it's kind of just amazing. They beat the Eagles 42-10 and the Cowboys 42, or they beat the Eagles 42-19 and they beat the Cowboys 42-10. Kind of an amazing two games there from them. So they've shown me all I've needed to see. And it's a shame that at one point this year I was a little bit down on them. Moving into the maybe most comical game of the week, the Chargers beat the Patriots 6-0 in the lowest scoring game since 2018.
Whew.
Mason, it's
Yeah.
I almost think Brandon Staley he
Should get
only
fired still.
well, okay, I was gonna say, like, yeah, maybe he should get fired for 6-0, but you know what? They shut out the Patriots. He's a defensive coach. I mean, technically, the win would have to go to him. So reluctantly, I must say, Brandon Staley's shout out was maybe the reason that they beat the Patriots rather than not. But I'll pose this question about the Patriots. Is there any part of you that feels, with the way that they've handled this quarterback situation, are you scared to bring in a rookie quarterback, another QB for Bill Belichick? I'm
Mm,
starting to get concerned because the way that they've treated Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi has just been utterly ridiculous. And I am not shocked at all that they scored 0 points. I'm
mhm.
just shocked that the Chargers only scored 6.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. Um, no, because you have to bring in a quarterback, but I just don't know which one. Like, is it going to be Caleb Williams? Is that the quarter? I feel like he's a drama queen. I just get that weird vibe from him, and I think if he went into New England and he's not liking how things are going, he's going to be a drama queen about it. He's going to be like, I don't want to be here. I'm not going to play. I'm hurt. I'm this. I'm that. I don't want to be here. I want stake of the team. I want to be the owner. I want to be the coach. I want to be the wide receiver, the quarterback, the offensive lineman, the defense, everything. He wants to be the show. And Bill Belichick ain't going to play that game. So I think if it was Caleb Williams in there, I think it would just be two just going at it like that, and I don't think it would be good.
That's
I
it.
don't.
That's interesting. I mean, I think honestly, Caleb Williams is still going to be first off the board, no matter what people think, and I think that that's going to the Bears still with the Panthers pick. Or if
Really.
I mean, I honestly, yeah, I think so. In all honesty, I think Caleb Williams has been shown to be a transformational QB in college, so I think the Bears are just going to pull the trigger on that. But if they don't and they trade it, if I'm the Patriots,
Mm,
I give the house.
yeah.
Yeah, but if I'm not the Patriots and I won't get the house, somebody will, and they'll move into that first overall pick. I will say this: I am concerned. I think I'm not concerned with how Bill Belichick can coach, but molding a young QB, you're right. They have to get another quarterback. They have to move on.
Hmm.
This has been a disaster. I mean, they're probably gonna have to cut Mac Jones. And we were talking about like should he? I mean, it's almost he's at the point where now like he requests a trade or request to be cut because
Hmm.
this is not working and this is just only digging him into a further hole as far as his reputation around the league,
It's rough.
getting a second chance. So that's been a mess. Moving to the NFC South though. This division might be won by a 7-10 or 8-9 team. The Saints could
Yeah.
not complete the comeback against the Lions. We mentioned that earlier. The Falcons beat the Jets 13-8. That's pretty much the nail in the coffin, in my opinion, for Aaron Rodgers coming back this year. And the Bucks did defeat the Panthers, and they are still alive. Um, are you wavering at all from the Falcons being your number one team in the NFC South?
I mean, yeah, for sure. They haven't looked as good as I thought they would be. They haven't taken advantage of a weaker division. Um, but I think that they're probably the best all around team. I think they're probably the best coached as well. I think, yeah,
Yeah,
I think they're the best
I think
coach.
Dennis Allen for the Saints could get fired this year. Depending on how
Yeah,
this year ends, I think he could get fired. Um,
and then Todd
Ironically, the
Bowles.
Saints are third in the division, so they are behind the Bucks. They're the only team with a positive point differential +2. I do still think that that team has the highest ceiling. Like I do think that when that they could compete with a playoff team, just because I mean, they came back on the Lions. Like they've had some good moments this year. Like I feel like that they could compete. I think if the Falcons were to get in, they have a good run game. But I don't think you can hide Desmond Ritter in the playoffs. I think that the NFL playoffs is slowly becoming, you cannot just run your way through and hide the fact that you don't have a generational QB unless you're the 49ers. And this Falcons team, for as much as that as much overhaul that they did in the offseason, and it looks like it's worked. They can't hide Desmond Ritter, man.
Mm-mm.
You can
He's
run,
not
but you
a
cannot hide in a
no.
sense. So I when I look at this schedule for these teams though,
That's what I'm right now.
when we did the preview, it's nothing crazy. They just all suck. I'd really like to see an 8-9 team though, because it always irritates me when a team has a really bad record it gets in, and I think 7-10 would be otherworldly bad for a playoff
Hmm.
team. So I would hate to see that, especially since I know that a team like perhaps the Vikings or even the Packers or the Rams or the Seahawks would be getting left out just on a numbers game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though they obviously have no chance to beat, whoever, like the Falcons or the Bucks or the Saints, because they're not competing for the same spot.
Uh,
Those teams are competing for the one division winner spot. But
I think looking at the schedules and how the season has gone, I think the Saints have the easiest remaining schedule. They play the Panthers, they got the Giants, the Rams is their toughest game, and that's in LA, prime time, and then the Bucks and the Falcons. So I think that they can beat the Panthers, the Giants. It's possible they beat the Rams. It's not likely, but it's possible. And then with the Bucks and the Falcons, it's a toss up either way. But I think that the Saints could beat the Bucks and they could also beat the Falcons. So I think they could end up going 4-1 in their last five, and that can help them win the division. Um, the Falcons, they have the Bucks, the Panthers, the Colts, the Bears, the Saints. I mean, I can see the Falcons beating the Bucks. I can see the Falcons beating the Panthers. With how the Colts have been playing, I don't know if they'll beat the Colts. The Bears with Justin Fields, I think that they could find a way to beat the Falcons, but I wouldn't be shocked the other way around. And then the Saints, that's again a toss up. And then when you look at the Bucks, who they have remaining, obviously it's the Falcons. They got the Falcons this upcoming week, the Packers, the Jags, the Saints, the Panthers. The Packers and the Jags, I think that they'll beat the Bucks pretty easily, and then they'll lose one at least one of these last divisional games. So I just don't see it for the Bucks. I like their team. I like Mike Evans. I like Rashad White as well. I think he's been playing very, very well of late. Baker Mayfield, I still think is fine, but I just don't. I don't see them winning those games against the Packers and the Jags to be able to put them over the hump and to leap the other team to leap the Falcons.
yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from. But yeah, moving into the Texans' huge win over the
Oh my
Broncos.
God.
I'm
Yep.
interested. How far could they go in the playoffs? Because this really, like we said, how huge this game was for both teams. This
Mhm.
really puts the Broncos in a tough spot. And the Texans are still eighth, so they're not actually in the playoffs just yet. But I definitely think that they're going to jump the Steelers and the Browns.
Mhm.
The Colts been playing good football, so I'll leave them be for now. Uh, but I think that they're going to jump the Steelers and the Browns. So how far do we think that the Texans can go in the playoffs? Because obviously we were going to also talk about this later. Jaguars may have lost Trevor Lawrence for a very long time, maybe for the rest of the regular season. I don't know how long exactly, but so maybe they win their division. But if they get into the playoffs, which it looks like they will, how far do we think that they can go?
I think they can win the divisional. Or no, I think they can get to the divisional. They wouldn't. I think they would win the wild card. Um, depending on who they play. Like if they're stuck playing a team like the Ravens, I can see them playing well against the Chiefs. I don't know if they're hosting a playoff game. If they're able to hop Jacksonville, then I think they can win that. But if they're one of the wild card teams playing Baltimore or Kansas City, then that's where I would be a little bit worried, or even the Dolphins for that matter, depending how things all shake out. Um, but if they're playing Jacksonville or any other wild card team, if they're the 4 seed, they got a shot. But other than that, if they're a wild card team, if they're in the 6 or 7 spot, I don't know if they make it out of the wild card.
Yeah,
But if they, yeah,
I definitely think it matters who they play. Honestly, I think the Texans could, and I like the Ravens. I feel like they could beat a team like the Ravens. I don't know if they could hold up like against a team like the Chiefs with such a great defense. And then I also don't know if they're going to be able to keep up with the Dolphins offense. But I feel like the Ravens are the same amount of like balance to the point where I think the Texans won't be overwhelmed by one specific side of the ball because I think this Texans team does have a ceiling for right now, and that's absolutely okay. They are surpassing so many expectations this year.
For sure.
But as far as they're concerned or their playoff hopes, I definitely think divisional, a wild card win is very possible. And I think a divisional appearance is right up their alley in all honesty. This is a very good team. I was very impressed with their win over the Broncos. They win a lot of close games, and that sometimes is a red flag, but I think it's really good considering they have a rookie QB at the helm, and that should show you just how much confidence you should have
And
in
a
this.
first year head coach. Like they're surpassing expectations. They are way further than they expected to be when the season started. So props to them for that at least.
Yeah, absolutely. And D'Amico Ryans is probably going to get coach of the year. So I think he
Mhm.
should. He probably would have my vote at this point.
Yep.
But last bit of week 13 NFL review. Unfortunately, we lost or may have lost another franchise quarterback for an extended period of time. Trevor Lawrence just banged up uh, from yesterday. I believe he has a high ankle sprain. What may have looked like one of those drop tackles. Well, not exactly a drop tackle, but it was more of like his leg like folded from like getting rolled up on or hitting his tackles
Yeah.
leg. It's a very unusual play. I hadn't really seen something like that, but it reminds me a lot of like the drop tackles, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Like when it like similar to the Jordan Travis play, but not like that, where nobody was really exactly like taking him down.
I know what you're saying because I saw it. He wasn't in the open field. He was still in the pocket and everything, and he kind of just got rolled up on, and it looked really bad. But you're saying you think that he's out for the season. I think he's kind of day to day or week to week. So I don't think he's out for the season. It's just a high ankle sprain right now, and I don't have their schedule pulled up right now, but
No, yeah, I don't know if he's out for the season, but I just did
uh,
not think that he was going to play over the next few weeks. I mean, I know. Okay, so Peterson described the injury as just a high ankle sprain, and it will not end his season, painting an optimistic picture. But I'd imagine he's going to be sidelined for a few weeks because it still didn't look good, and obviously they didn't have a cart, so he could barely walk on his
that
ankle
was
cord.
crazy.
Yeah,
That was absurd. Like, how are you gonna let that happen at your field? You're gonna let your franchise guy have to walk with his arms around a police officer and excuse me and a athletic trainer? Like, come on, you can't let that happen. So,
well,
but that's besides the point. But
I'm shocked that was the case for him. I think this Jaguars team though is very similar to the Bengals team, who ironically they did play. I don't think that they have any chance without Trevor Lawrence out there under any circumstances in any game. I think he's so important, and I think it really shows that. So, and despite the Bengals winning without Joe Burrow, I think it's really the same thing. I don't really think the Bengals have anywhere to go in this playoff hunt. So, I think that this Jags team is going to have to they're going to have their head on a swivel. They got the Browns and the Ravens. I think that they'll lose both of those games if Lawrence doesn't play.
mhm.
And then they got Bucks, Panthers, Titans, all three winnable games. Titans is I can see the Titans spoiling the Jags season again, or
Whew.
attempting to. They didn't last year, but I could see them getting very close, even with Trevor Lawrence out there. So they're really going to need him back for this stretch. Um, maybe he sits against the Browns and they try their luck to see if they can get a win. At Cleveland, but I think they're gonna need him for the Ravens game, or else that's a loss. That's also a Sunday night game too.
Yeah, the it'll be tough if he's out for an extended period of time. It's gonna be rough sledding for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and then that opens up the door for teams like the Colts and the Texans to fight for the division, and that's not what we expected at all.
No, not at
So,
all. And you know what? We haven't mentioned the Bills. They did have a bye. Very interesting dynamic if the Texans, who are in front of the Bills, end up winning their division and the Jags just fall off completely. That does open up an extra spot for the Bills to at least try to make a run. But
Sure does.
I don't even know in the AFC if that were to happen, and still not ready to hit the panic button just yet for the Jags. Although it looks to be that they're completely out of contention for the number one seed,
Mhm.
so looks to be just the Dolphins, Ravens, and Chiefs race, and the Chiefs just lost to the Packers, which we barely talked about. Which I think we still both trust the Chiefs no matter what. This happens. This
Yeah.
sort of stuff happens. And the Packers are in the thick of a playoff hunt when they're all of a sudden now really into things in the NFC. So shout out to the Packers. But we'll move in to our last topic, which is the Thursday night football preview. It is Patriots versus Steelers. This is a toilet bowl, essentially. Patriots are a lost cause, and Mitch Trubisky will start in place of Kenny Pickett because Kenny Pickett had surgery on a high ankle sprain that he suffered on Sunday just yesterday, and he should be sidelined for a couple weeks.
Yeah. That was tough. I actually picked him up in fantasy because I needed a quarterback, and he goes down with his ankle injury. Um, I don't know if you saw my face, but I made a snooze face because this game is going to be a snooze fest. That's actually my lock. It's not a bet at all. Don't bet on this game. Just go away. Just go do something else. Go out with your friends. Finals is over basically at that time for all the college kids. At least us. I know there's some schools. I got a friend out in BYU. He's still got 2 more weeks left of school and everything. But yeah, go do something else. Don't watch this game. Both of the like, especially if you're a Patriots fan, unless you're like lose, 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 then maybe you'll want to watch it. But I don't want to ever watch my team purposefully lose. Um, and then as for the Steelers, Mitch Trubisky, he's so far gone. Like there's no reason that he should be playing other than the fact that uh Pickett is injured. So yeah, this game's gonna suck. This Thursday night football, a lot of the Thursday night football games have sucked this season, except last week. Last week was pretty good with Dallas and Seahawks, but yeah, this one is not one I'm gonna be paying attention to.
Yeah, it looks as though the over under is at 29 and a half. When I put this
Oh,
down, it was at 30 and a half. Maybe continue to hammer that. I don't know if that's still a playable mark. Because even 17-14 kind of gives you a little bit of pause, because that hits the over on the 30 and a half point. But that's my lock. That's really the only thing I have from this game. I think the Steelers definitely they obviously need this to continue their playoff push.
yeah,
This would really show, in my opinion, just how if they were to lose this game, how right in a sense I think we are about them falling out of the playoffs. Although I just don't think it's going to happen this week. You mentioned it. The Patriots fans are probably rooting for them to get the best draft pick possible. At the very least, end up at number 2 and have a chance to take the first quarterback off the board. And if not the first quarterback off the board, have a chance to trade that to get the first pick and then take the first quarterback off the board, or at least have yourself a safety net. Maybe you like Drake May more. Maybe you really like Michael Penix, although I just don't see him being the second pick. Maybe you like a quarterback. They're in full draft mode right now. Those fans, the season is long gone. The Panthers were the first team eliminated in the NFL at 1
yep.
and 11. Patriots are 2 and 10. I don't know if they could get eliminated this week, or how the AFC standings look, but I feel like they're pretty close to it. If they go 2 and 11, I'd imagine that should eliminate them. But my lock for this week is the over under. I'm sure there's a ton of under um bets that you could take for this week as far as as far as the pass game goes for both of these squads, or an under on the Patriots points, whatever their total is. I think I would take a look at that. And then I would also take the over on quarterback controversies and quarterback switches and benches for the Patriots, because at this point it's just getting ridiculous. They don't know who their quarterback is.
What's the over under? 1.5 QB changes during the game for for the Patriots.
Yeah, or even this week leading up to the game, like over under 3.5 vague comments from Bill Belichick on who they're going to start this week. It's the
Oh,
same old thing. You have no idea. This team, they have no direction. They have no directions. And Ramondre Stevenson, I believe, suffered an injury as well. I don't know if he'll
I
be
was
good
about
to
to say
go.
that.
I mean,
Yeah,
this Patriots offense is just in shambles.
yeah, yeah. It's rough out there for the New England Patriots, but that's what you get. You were at the top of the world for 20 years, and you had to come down to earth at some point, and maybe they're going to hell for a little bit, but they'll be back. They'll
Yeah.
be back.
So any shout outs in between the time between now and our next episode in a few days? I got one because we didn't talk any of it. Was the NBA in-season tournament.
Oh my God, it's so good.
Yeah, we haven't talked about it, and we'll get to it. Maybe we'll get to it in the preview because we'll talk a little bit of the Heisman, or excuse me, not the Heisman, the transfer portal. Then we'll preview all the games, and maybe we'll mention a little bit of the in-season tournament. Well, this looks like a complete success
Hmm.
for the NBA. These guys are going hard. Celtics just got eliminated, I believe, against the
By the
Pacers.
Pacers.
Yeah, this has just been a phenomenal dry run. My only hope and my only concern is I just don't want it to wear off in a sense. I feel like
Yeah.
this year, man, it's already secured. That everybody loves it and they're gonna try super hard. I would just say let's not get complacent and let's not have it be like the NBA All-Star game. Hate to bring it up, but man, the players just they played hard for Kobe in that very first year, and then they've tried to do some formatting things with it, and it just simply has not worked. And the All-Star game is kind of back to square one where nobody cares and it looks really bad. Um, I just hope that the in-season tournament continues next year as the entity that it is this year, which is super exciting, super fun, and the players care because
For
that
sure.
has really made this first part of the NBA season actually enjoyable and watchable. Otherwise, we wouldn't have talked about it till Christmas.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I've never been a huge basketball watcher or someone who pays attention. Definitely during the start of the season, I pretty much pick it up towards the end of the season and the playoffs. But seeing the videos, seeing the courts and everything, I mean, I know I kind of dogged on it a bit earlier in a couple weeks ago when we talked about it, but it's been electric, and we were wrong. At least I was wrong. I can't remember if you had said,
I was skeptical. I didn't think that this was
okay,
going to be any good. I
yeah.
really didn't. I didn't think that the players were going to care. And I'm
Yep.
still, like I've said, I'm still concerned. It almost seems too good to be true.
Yeah, well, they seem to care. They're playing their hearts out. I mean, $500,000 is a lot of money, so it's something worth playing for. So it's definitely been a success, and we were wrong at least for this season. Hopefully, they can continue it. But my shout out, it's actually going on right now. We got the NAIA women's volleyball championship game. I have a friend of mine who was in the game. She is a starter for Indiana Wesleyan, and hopefully they can pull out the win. They're currently down 1-0. They were 37-0 going into this game, so they're trying to pull off perfection and win a championship. So we'll have to see what happens. But shout out to Cassie and her entire team out there for Indiana Wesleyan and NAIA. Respect to those people who play NAIA because it's still high competition. There's no disrespect to them at all.
Absolutely. A lot of people have gone to the professional ranks, especially in the NFL through that
Hmm.
route. So definitely good athletics there. Glad we were able to get that in. Fun
Yeah,
shout
for
outs.
sure.
But yeah, this has been the Streakers podcast. I'm Patrick Previty. That's Mason Migliara. We'll be back in a few days previewing week 14 of the NFL, talking NBA in season tournament for real this time, and talking everything NIL and transfer portal. But until then, we'll see you next time.